time on Finnegan's Garage, jewelry for the C10 in the form of the baddest sequential gearbox I've ever seen in my life.
It's so pretty.
You don't get to drive.
What?
All right, this is a huge day for this channel specifically. The turbojet boat is done. We're not working on that anymore. Blasphemy is done. We're not working on that anymore. What we are going to work on is my 1967 Chevrolet C10. And for fans of this channel, you know I built that truck like 10 years ago. And it was a show truck. It didn't do anything great. It was bagged and body dropped on 22-inch wheels. It basically hard parked everywhere. It didn't do anything great. It didn't stop. It didn't turn. None of that stuff. Well, I ran into my friend Justin Padfield from Scott's Hot Rods a few years ago, and he mentioned he still had it. It had been sitting in the corner of his shop after I sold it to him. I bought it back with no motor and trans and immediately made plans to make the thing perform instead of just look cool. So the old T5 trans gone, LS2 gone. In its place, an LT4 supercharged 650 horsepower engine from Chevrolet Performance and a T56 Magnum gearbox, which is a stellar 6-speed transmission. Then, after changing a whole lot of other things, including the suspension, the wheels, the tires, the front clip, I made the mistake of going to the SEMA show and the PRI show, and I ran into these dudes. This is Clay and Rick. They work at 6xdgearbox.com, and they have built what I believe to be the finest sequential 6-speed gearbox ever conceived by man. This thing is bananas, and right now they're going to show me how it functions, because A, I can't find a good video on YouTube about how not only my G-Force GF5R that's in Blasphemy, how that functions, but I can't find a good video of how a sequential gearbox functions. So we're going to go through that right now, and they're going to show me all of the benefits of this insane billet transmission, and then we're stabbing it in the C10 for extra motivation so that we get this thing finished, all right? Because it's time. Turbo boat's done, Blasphemy's done, we're going to make the C10 rip, and then we're going to have fun this summer. My experience is limited to the G-Force GF5R that's in Blasphemy, okay? And that is a transmission that you can shift with an H-pattern shifter, which is, you know, up, down, left, right, or what's called a vertical gate shifter, which is forward, back, forward, back. This is called a sequential, all right? So that means we're just going to go first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, without lifting off the throttle, which is pretty damn amazing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But right now, we're going to give you the first look you've ever seen inside of the 6XD, and also show you how does a sequential gearbox actually function, because these guys have this awesome display, and I'm going to work the shifter, you're going to rotate the input shaft, because that has to be rotating for this to work, and Clay, you're going to walk us through what is happening when we do this.
Sounds good. So right now you are in neutral, as you can see.
Okay.
Every shifter fork is not engaged to a gear at all. So if you pull back, you'll see it's going to go into first gear. So what it did is engage the slider dog with the faceplate dog. So now you're running, the power's coming down through the headset, or drop gear they call it, through the cluster shaft, back up through the main shaft, because of this gear is being selected from the dogs, and out your output shaft.
So I have a question now. Sorry to stop you there. I'm in first gear. Do I have to go second, third, fourth, fifth, or can I go back to neutral?
You can go back to neutral.
How does that happen?
So right now, if you try to push back into neutral, it won't go, will it?
It will not.
So you need to push the lockout button that's on the top.
Okay.
So now it will go.
I heard a solenoid.
Yep.
Okay. And then...
So now that will allow you to go. And that's basically to prevent road course racers going down in the corner, downshift all the way into first gear, and then accidentally going into neutral.
Aha,
before they come out of the turn, obviously. Same reason a motorcycle transmission, you can't find neutral at the very bottom. The very bottom is first gear.
Right. Okay, so we're in neutral, so I'm going to go first. second.
So that's second. So now your next pull is going to disengage that one and engage third.
Okay. Third.
And then it's going to go from third to fourth.
Fourth.
Fourth to fifth.
Fifth.
Fifth to sixth.
Now notice the entire time the input shaft is turning. And basically I can keep my foot flat on the floor and do that right there. 2 fingers just bang this thing.
Yep.
Wow. Because right now I can't do that. In Blasphemy, I estimate I'm giving up probably 7 or 8 hundredths of a second, probably closer to a tenth every time I shift the car, because in order to get it to go to the next gear, I have to unload the input shaft just a little bit. And right now I burp the throttle. I'm basically granny shifting Blasphemy. Running 850s. I'm burping the throttle, which in that car with the blower, burping the throttle is going from $7,000 to $4,000, no matter how fast you burp the throttle, and then the engine has to accelerate again. So you're wide open, burp the throttle, pull the gear, back on the throttle. So it wastes a ton of time. This transmission is super modern. I wouldn't put it in Blasphemy. I would put it in a drag car though. I know you guys originally, you built these and drift guys ran them, guys running road courses ran them, but you have built a drag version of this trans. What is the difference between this and the drag version?
Rick? That would be we have a thicker and wider headset.
Okay.
We go from the standard 1.1 style to this 1.5-inch version.
So it's a wider gear.
Catches much more engagement, obviously, on the splines of the shafts and surface area of the teeth. So in conjunction with the wider headset, we also do the same thing for first gear. It also runs an 1.5-inch wide first gear for the drag racers like yourself running big 2,000 horsepower, 3,000 horsepower. That is the weakest link in all drag racing boxes that are manual is first gear, because you have such a big main shaft gear and such a tiny little main shaft gear. You need to have the width to carry that load.
First gear is what I break. I think I've broken it twice now in Blasphemy. And first gear, well, you have to understand what's happening when you're drag racing, especially with a manual gearbox, is clutch is in, you're on the starting line, you're sitting on a 2-step, or you're building boost, or whatever it is, and then you dump the clutch, and if you don't have a slipper clutch, you're shocking the entire drive line, including first gear. And first gear in a lot of gearboxes isn't very wide, and it just shatters it. And it's happened to me. It happened at Drag Week. If you've seen the Motor Trend episode of Roadkill, you've seen me blow up first gear. And so that was my big worry going forward, is what am I going to do? Because I'd like to go faster. I have a project in my brain that I think this transmission would be amazing for in a drag application, that when it happens and I show it to you, you probably won't believe this would live behind 2,000 horsepower in a 5,000-pound car. That'll give you a clue about what I'm doing. But I believe it will, based on the upgrades you guys have made to this thing. The other things I like about this is the serviceability. If something does go wrong, I think you guys pointed this out already to me, the dogs aren't built into the gears. So the dog is the part you're going to kill, right?
Exactly.
If you miss a shift.
Yeah, the dog ring and the slider, obviously since there is no synchros, you're engaging these two teeth instantly within less than a millisecond. So once in a while, people will obviously round the corner of these dogs off. So when that happens, obviously that's the biggest wear and tear item on a dog box or race box is the dog rings and slider. So you want to have that, obviously, to be a user-friendly box. You want those to be replaceable. You don't want to buy a whole together like this one where the dogs are machined onto the gear.
Right.
So if you ding up and round off a dog ring like they're doing here, taking chunks out of it, now you've got to replace this whole gear. And especially in drag racing application, like you're saying with first gear, a lot of the first gears out there are integrable. So the gear is machined right onto the shaft. So now, hey, this gear is perfect, which it is. The face of the gears are awesome, but the teeth are chewed up.
Right.
Now you're into, $1,200, $1,300 gear set because you're in shaft and everything else. Or like as Clay has there, it's replaceable.
So the one that Clay's holding is your guys's, and you're just going to replace the dog part.
Exactly.
These are identical to the GSR gears as well. So there's a lot of guys out there that already have the GSR transmissions and spare parts to go with them because they build them. Identical gears. These are the exact same part number gears, exact same part number faceplate dogs and slider dogs. Yeah. So all of the guys that have those inventories set, ready to go, don't have to duplicate all their spare parts. But back to that point, yeah, you just replace this. And Rick, what does this cost?
It's $200.
So that's a $200 versus, you know, a
$1,000 gear set.
Right.
So you multiply that across a handful of gears through, you know.
Starts adding up.
Yeah.
If you round them off. We've actually had a lot of success with this gearbox in and of itself, more than the GSRs it even works on, just because I think the rigidity of the box, it just doesn't round off dogs as well.
Exactly.
It engages the gears real cleanly, and it's amazing how the faceplates are coming back used, and you can't even tell they've been in the box.
Wow.
We send pictures to clients and show them. They're like, wow, we ran a whole year. We ran 21 races on that thing, and it literally, if you held it up to a new one, you couldn't tell the difference, which honestly astounds me also. But Clay's designed this box to have such tight tolerances. There's not a lot of play in it. So by the time you are pulling on the stick, it's really actually grabbing the edge of the dog, and because they're angle cut, it sucks it in for you. So by the time you actually hit your stop here, you're long been in gear already.
Yeah. And it's very smooth. That's the part that
exactly.
it's just I'm hardly even, I mean, that is just.
And this is worse. When it's in a car, it's going to shift even easier. When you get higher RPM, higher you're spinning.
And then some of the other technology I noticed, I think it was we're at the PRI show, I met, I forget his name, I'm horrible about this, a dude from X Engineering that makes a blip shift setup. Max.
Exactly, Max.
He built a blip shift setup for this that will rev match for you if you wanted to, so that you can up and down shift into corners.
And it's not, you don't even need, the whole thing was in the beginning when we started talking about designing this box and doing it, racers designing something for other racers, is have it where you're not having to spend $4,000, $6,000 on an expensive ECU. Something like this, you can. It's a standalone setup with a drive-by-wire.
You can run it with a carburetor.
You can run it with a carburetor, exactly. Trans Am is running it with an MSD box, so you don't need. The beauty of it, like you said, Max with Engineering is he's put a package together for us where we install a load cell that goes and signals your ECU or your black box in this case.
Okay.
And like you said, you can flat shift it up and blip throttle down.
That is cool. Oh man. Can I play with it some more?
Sure.
Not just making sit here and do manual labor, but it's so fun.
And like Clay said, when you're running it in a car and the higher RPM, as that dog is grabbing, obviously I'm just doing it manually, it does suck it into gear.
You won't have the double going in now, just like you did.
Got it. And what's the process for putting it in reverse?
Same as going into neutral, just hold the button down and go again. And you're in reverse.
You'll be able to, you can see this is turning opposite direction.
Oh yeah, okay. So now the output shaft's turning the other way. That's so cool. Okay, this is cool. So these, I'm not replacing gears in most cases. I'm just replacing the dogs. What else did you guys do to this thing to make it serviceable?
So apart from that, obviously, we're at the racetrack. We race. We know what you service. We know what we get aggravated with. We know what you get aggravated spending money on. So when we designed this thing, tried to make it as modular as possible, replace minimum parts if things get dinged up or messed up. One of the largest factors in that is the shift barrel design that we have. We have a shaft going through here, and we have separate barrels that are mounted to that shaft. These part numbers are identical. This is first and second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So a lot of times these get dinged up or your forks get dinged up. A lot of transmissions it's a one-piece shaft, and this thing is expensive. I've seen figures of about $8,000 before. Whew. It's crazy. I don't even know what these are.
Extra.
But either way, they're a couple $100 if you ding this up, and it's fixed. similar situation is our forks. We actually probably wondering what this little pin right here does. Well, that's the pin that's actually following on the inside of this of the barrel. So if this gets dinged up,
oh, it's reversible.
There's no sense in throwing it away when you can flip the thing over, and you at least have 2 uses out of it.
Yeah. All right, I see it now. Pin there, pin there.
So if you're a pit box application, so to speak, like Clay was saying, being user friendly and not spending a lot of money, you really only need 1 shift barrel, which will fit 1st to 6th, and 1 fork, because this fork will also, like Clay mentioned, fit any location in the box.
Right.
So pull the pin
you don't
out.
even need
basically,
a spare fork.
Exactly. The front cover would come off.
Yeah, because you can reverse the existing ones.
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool. So really, spares, you're going to bring that with you and maybe one of these, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is cool.
We chose to design an oil pump that actually works like a dry sump. In connection with ARE, obviously, I've been long-term with them for 15 years for dry sumps for engines. So Clay designed a pump. Gary at ARE was gracious enough to be like, yeah, we'll produce them for you. This actually sucks off the bottom of the gearbox, just like a dry sump in an engine off your pan. And we have a dry sump screen that's actually in there. So if you're at the track, you know, and you think, huh, you know what, I think I missed a gear, I didn't, you know, I crunched it a couple times, whatever, and you want to check it, you don't have to pull the box apart to check your pump. You can literally 4 screws. This just slides back. It's on a hex drive in the back of the lay shaft. Pull your screen out, look at it. We're good to go. It goes back in. Everything is O-ringed. And you put your screws back in. We advise blue Loctite on the screws. And you're back in business, literally.
External line so you can easily incorporate a cooler if you'd like to.
Exactly. On your C10 truck, we would run this out of the pump to your cooler up front, come back in with cool oil, and spray the gearbox. The gearbox is all pressure fed. Like I said there again, everything's O-ringed. There's an O-ring here for the oil galley between each section of the main cases. And that pressure feeds all your gears, your back bearings, your front bearing, everything is sprayed. Wow. So it's always under high volume oil flow from the pump versus high pressure.
No pulling the trans out of the car or truck when you're questioning whether it's okay. You just pull the pump off, check the screen. Oh, that is cool. And no silicone everywhere.
No silicone.
Like, that is awesome.
O-rings for the win, for sure.
Oh, man. Even the shifter is trick. Like, if you're not in the carbon, like, you'll be into this because all you do is loosen the bolts and spin it around to a different position if you don't like where it's at.
Exactly. I grab a T.
You guys have legit thought of everything. I can't see anything on this. And I'm by no means a professional. I've broken a lot of things in my life. And I can't see anything that I was like, yeah, I wouldn't have done that. This is amazing.
Well, guys that have been in sequential businesses for a while, so to speak, in as far as racers, I'll let him do that.
Yeah, sorry. So you want to switch drivers, you're doing an endurance race, you're running with your buddy, you get in, you're bigger, taller, longer arms, you're going to have the handle up there, he jumps in, you flip it to the back, lock the screws down and go again.
Wow.
Or if you want something crazy offset, this is a normal 1-inch diameter. Fabricators obviously can grab some 1-inch tubing and bend what they want, make their own little holder there, and away you go.
That is cool. And look at how it's so simple. Like, okay, there's forward, side, back. You can change forward and back and left to right of where it is, just loosening a couple of screws.
Nothing complicated, just simple.
Oh, that's cool.
Tried to make it as user friendly and efficient as possible.
This I think is going to fit better. I think the shift tower is above the floor, and this trans is about 6 5/8 inches shorter, and it's narrower.
For sure.
Like, this is going to fit better, and it looks like it has a way bigger output shaft.
It does. It's a 32 spline, which is common amongst your dog box style racing boxes out there, versus the OEM style is like a 28 spline. It's a much smaller. So it's very similar to what they call like a TH400 automatic style, but it has to be a hardened yoke because there's the dual roller bearings we have in the back here. Flat, it carries more load with less drag. So you're not losing any parasitic horsepower, so to speak. But those hard yoke, it definitely has to be a hardened yoke.
Okay, so you can't go rob any old yoke.
You
off
can't.
Of,
yeah, the OEM, it'll just chew it right up.
Okay, all right. So hardened yoke. Okay, so it's a 26 spline input for, you know, that's basically Chevy LS, basically late model GM style stuff.
Correct.
And then old school turbo 400 output shaft, but you need a hardened yoke.
But hardened, yes, sir.
Okay. And then in general, it's narrower, it's shorter, it's stronger.
Exactly.
It's better.
I'm Skyler. I'm part of the 6XD team, and I'm the main machinist, pretty much the only machinist at the shop. But just kind of talking about the case, the transmission, it's all billet. The two cases start out as a, let me think about this, 7.5 inch thick by 10.5 by 8.5 inch thick billet that I think weighs in at like right at 80 pounds, and then when it's finished it's 9 pounds. So we take out quite a bit of material on the cases. We like the case aspect, I mean the billet aspect of it instead of a casting. If we want to make changes, I know on version 2, possibly version 3, we changed the rib thickness. We added, I changed tool paths in the pockets just to make it look cooler. We can change. We're going to add another fill plug. So being a billet case, we're able to change things on the fly and instead of having to tool up for a whole nother casting. There's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Trying to count all the aluminum billet pieces that are in this that make up the transmission. 8 or 9 different pieces that make up the case and the front plate, the rear tail housing, the reverse plate. It's all machined in-house in Kannapolis, North Carolina. And we assemble them all and ship them out.
Okay, and this one over here, I've been staring at it going, what, why? It looks like that's just turned on its side, right?
So yeah, that's exactly
Basically.
right. We first designed it for the Trans Am series. All the guys running in the Trans Am series, they run about 15 races a year or so. Tons of different cars, whether it be Cadillacs, Challengers, things like that, but they get their engines as low as they can, where the ground clearance here would be an issue. So we have it laid over on its side and got tons more ground clearance. So it still has the same tail housing adapters. So on the rear, it still technically uses the same shifter bracket that's on the standard 6XD. We just have this one mounted to show the additional options, upgrade options that you can have for a regular 6XD or this gearbox is this Motec air shift paddle shift. And actually we got it hooked up, so here we go. We're in reverse right now. Upshift on the right. First.
That's so cool.
And we got neutral lockout on this as well, so you got to push that before you can go down into neutral. Obviously reverse as well. So, and we actually have all this system. I like the setup because it's super simple, just running off of a CO2 tank. People could get really crazy and running off a to save weight off of a paintball gun tank if they want to.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just something.
Yeah. If you don't
light.
have leaks, that will last a long time.
Oh yeah. Especially on like a drag strip or something. You could actually run this real small canisters.
Yeah, because that's not a lot of volume. Look at that. That's the piston area right there.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't take up much air. That is trick. And how much ground clearance does it save flipping on its side?
I can't remember. You remember?
This setup puts us underneath 4 inches. It's like 3 7/8 inch ground clearance.
Good measure, yes. That right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Your crankshaft, I think, at that point is your limiting factor.
Right, yeah.
If you're running the crank smaller than that, then you need to step up.
And a dry sump tank, obviously, or dry sump pan, obviously. So.
You better have a skid plate on that car at that point.
Time Attack is another good one. Custom street rodders that we've dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
But right now there's 5 of these in Trans Am.
You'll notice that I am dressed differently, and my beard is probably a different length, and that's because it's a different day. Yes, we've already mocked up the 6XD sequential gearbox. We didn't have the clutch when we did that, though, and today we do. So those other guys are gone. We're gonna have to soldier on without them. I think we can do this. This clutch is near and dear to my heart because it's made by the same company that made the clutch in Blasphemy. That same clutch that survived 2 drag weeks and won its class and has had thousands of street miles, burnouts, and 8-second passes done to it. That's right, Mantic. They are back. They're in the mix. And this crazy case is what your Mantic clutch comes in. It's not just mine, it's yours. Things I like about Mantic. First off, made in the good old US of A. That's right. And all of its clutches, much like this diaphragm style twin disc that we're about to install, are fully rebuildable and upgradable. This particular clutch will handle, according to the dudes at Mantic, 1,000 foot-pounds of torque at the crank. And if that's not enough, we'll just change what this disc's made out of and handle even more. That's right. Everything we need to install it is here, including the alignment tool. And this thing is lightweight, just like the billet flywheel we're putting on, also from Mantic. All of their stuff is designed to be light, to rev quick. It's got a low mass, low moment of inertia. You're going to put more power to the ground. You're going to have quicker shifts. And if you go to the description of this video, there is a discount code. You can get 10% off your order when you click on it. And use me. That's what I'm here for. Use me. Save some money. Alright, so we're going to put this on. We're going to put our RTS bell housing back on, transmated together, back on the engine, and then the engine's going to go back in the truck, hopefully for one of the last 10 or 12 times. And we will soldier on with other things like building headers. Step 1, after you've cleaned all your new parts with acetone or something like that to remove any greasy handprints or stickers or residue, first thing we're going to do is drop in the bolts through the back side of our flywheel facing the transmission. Now, there's 2 different ways to do this. Some flywheels are drilled and tapped, other ones are not. This one has a slot milled in it, and then it's got holes, and these bolts will go through here. And then these standoffs, which are precision machined, will give our stack up for our clutch discs and our pressure plate. So we'll drop all these bolts in, and then we'll bolt the flywheel to the crankshaft. And then we can start aligning clutch discs and installing the clutch. There we go. Now this can go on. Somewhere along the line we lost the dowel for our engine, and so Newbern just cut up a grade 8 bolt, the shank portion of it, and turned that into a dowel. This is a metric engine. It's hard to find parts sometimes like this when you need them. Okay, there we go. That's on there. These are still seated. Cool. All right. Now we can install our clutch. Okay, and now we're ready to install our first clutch disc. Right? They make this really easy. See? It's engraved flywheel side. So it's really hard to screw this up. Plate's gonna go on the drive blocks, just like that. And you notice everything's bouncing around, so I'm once again gonna reach in there, make sure the drive blocks are in the groove, make sure the bolt heads are still in the groove. All right, and again, next clutch disc, it is marked pressure plate side. So that side will face the transmission. And now the cover.
We'll see how long it takes you to figure it out.
What? Ah, we forgot to put the mid plate on. Son of a gun. We gotta start all over again. Put the camera down, Dave. Do something with your life.
Crap.
Well, despite our best efforts to screw this whole thing up, we managed to get the Mantic clutch, flywheel, and 6XD gearbox bolted up to our Chevy LT4, and the whole combo is back in the 67. Now all we've got to do is finish that passenger side header that we never built in the last video. Some wiring, some plumbing, a fuel system, brakes, fabrication, you know. Not much left to do before we drive this thing this summer. Stay tuned.